Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and how it affects those that are living with the condition. EDS is a group of genetic connective tissue disorders, and some of the most common signs and symptoms include joint hypermobility, frequent dislocations and subluxations, chronic pain, easy bruising, fragile skin, organ rupture, organ prolapse, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. The list goes on and on. I was diagnosed with EDS when I was 15 years old, and I was also diagnosed with postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, dysautonomia, complex regional pain syndrome, and other related conditions. EDS has been a big part of my life. In some ways, it affects everything I do. Because of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, I never did learn to ride a bike, and I always tripped over my feet as a little kid. Well, I still do. I got yelled at in kindergarten because I could not hold a pencil properly. Ultimately, they figured my handwriting was legible, so it didn't really matter, but it was kind of a big deal. Gym class was always my worst nightmare. It was incredibly painful, and no one really knew why, and at the time we didn't realize that the activities I was doing were actually damaging my body. I was always crying, I was always in pain, I always had a stomach ache, or my leg was hurting, it was always something. And when the doctors looked and didn't see something immediately wrong, everybody just assumed I was being manipulative, and I was attention-seeking, I was just a drama queen. Because nobody really understood what was really happening. And after a while, I started to question myself and my own feelings, and it became pretty isolating. And it was rough. When I finally had a diagnosis, things started to make sense. But having a condition that I'd never heard of and my friends hadn't heard of, there was still that sense of isolation. So I had to find a way to feel like a part of something. So I went online and I created an Instagram account just about my journey with EDS. And next thing I know, I was meeting people from all over the world. And I'd made these friends, and I started helping people that were going through similar things that I was, and people started helping me. And I realized I was actually already making a difference. Even though it was just with a small community, I helped one girl get a diagnosis, I led some people to resources that were helpful. People that I know came to me saying, hey, I'd never heard of EDS before, but you'd done so much to educate people about it, and I just met someone with it, and they were so glad to know I actually knew what it was. And it's things like that that made me realize I was a part of something, which was really important because at that time I was really struggling because I was not doing things the way I wanted to, and my life wasn't really going as planned. I wasn't able to go to traditional high school, which at the time felt like the end of the world. I was sure I had failed and my life was over. That was not the case. It wound up actually being a great opportunity. I graduated high school early with a pretty solid GPA, college scholarships came my way, it all worked out. It worked out for the better. I have so many things that don't go as planned. And for me, that's hard to accept, but it's something I'm learning to do. I'm always afraid because my life isn't consistent. I hate making commitments. Because what if my body doesn't cooperate and I have to break it off? And I'm afraid to go to bed at night sometimes. It's always in the back of my mind that I could roll over in bed and have a serious injury. It's happened before. And I don't know if tomorrow night I'm going to go to bed and wake up with an injury that will never heal. But it might not happen. And I can't dwell on the what ifs. Sometimes I do, and when I do, it gets me absolutely nowhere. I'm not going to claim that I'm always super positive and perky about everything, because it does suck. Sometimes it seems like I spend more time at doctor's offices and in hospitals than I actually spend here in my own home. But you can find beauty and reasons to smile wherever you are. I really don't think that's a problem to not be at home, because a 2-week hospital stay seems like it has to absolutely be miserable. And yeah, in a way it is. It's not really ideal. But you can still make connections, and you can still smile and laugh, even when you're in pain and even when things just suck. I've learned that I have to trust myself above everyone else, because I know my body better than anybody else possibly can. And even doctors can be wrong. Sure, they have lots of valuable information and resources, and many doctors truly do want to help, but they're human. They can mess up. They don't always care. I've learned that I shouldn't believe everything I hear. I need to do my own research, because for me, that can be the difference between life and death. Trust me, it's come close to that multiple times. Advocacy, that's a big thing. Self-advocacy is something I struggle with a lot, but I'm kind of being forced to improve. If it weren't for EDS, I don't think I would really be working so hard to improve those skills. General advocacy, I'm fine with. I could write a novel on disability rights and activism and accessibility and the lack of accessibility, even in places where they are really making an effort to make life accessible. But when it comes to advocating for my own needs, that's a whole different story. I've lost friends and I've made friends. I've found out that people I never expected to be such a big part of my life have been incredibly supportive and now mean the world to me. I've realized that there's so much more to life than just your health. Everybody always says, oh, at least you have your health, that's all that really matters. But the truth is, that's not all that matters. I don't have my health. I will never be a generally healthy person, and that totally sucks. If I could be a generally healthy person, would I? Well, of course. But it's okay that I'm not, because your health isn't everything. There are other things in life. If I really believed that health was everything, I would think my life is nothing. But my life can be meaningful. I mean, I'd like to hope that it already is, but there are so many other ways to create a meaningful life than just being healthy. You create connections and you change lives one by one. You find your passions and you find reasons to smile. Sure, your health is something you should look after, but don't think that your health is the be-all or end-all. Just because you aren't healthy doesn't mean you've somehow failed. That's kind of an absurd thing to think, isn't it? Yeah. I think one of our biggest problems as people is that we think our lives have to follow a certain path. Society has set this roadmap of this is how you have to live your life, and if you don't do things this way in this order at this point in time, you have failed. So whenever something doesn't go as planned, we feel like we failed, that we failed ourselves and that we failed our friends and our family and society. But that's not the case. Think about it. We're all unique individuals. Everyone is different. How can you expect that every last one of us will be able to succeed by following the same path? We can't. It's just unreasonable and it's unrealistic. And once I realized that, I quit seeing myself as having failed at life, but I see that I've just adapted my life, that I have come up with some really interesting ways to go up and down stairs, and I use crutches for walking long distances, And sometimes I use a wheelchair when that doesn't work out. And I did online school instead of traditional high school. I have found ways to make life work for me, because what works for my able-bodied friends isn't going to be what works for me. So that's just the beginning of what I've learned from EDS. I think there's probably a bunch of things I forgot about that I wanted to talk about that I'll think of in the middle of the night tonight at like 2 a.m. Of course, yeah, that's the time. And I'll continue to learn more as I go on. And I can't wait to learn more. I am ready for whatever lessons life has to throw at me, I hope. We'll see. But my life is different. My life is painful. It's hard. It can absolutely suck at times. And sometimes I sit there and cry because I am sure my life is the worst thing in the world and everything is over. But that's not the case. I have a life that is meaningful because having a disability or a chronic illness does not make me less. It just means I have to work a little bit harder. And I think one of the biggest things I've learned over these past few years is that people with chronic illnesses and disabilities are amazing. Just remember that. Thank you. If you're interested in helping me out with some EDS advocacy, just let me know. I'd be more than willing to send you some information and work on some new projects. Thanks for watching. Remember, when you hear hoofbeats, it might be a zebra.